Greetings, my dear viewers. It is I, Drayhon, and welcome back once again to Pathfinder Hero Frame, where we take a look at the different ancestries within Pathfinder 2nd Edition and look at their lore to see what backgrounds and classes would best fit these ancestries. That way we can help you create a character just by using the basic information of these ancestries. This is a parody series of my Dungeons & Dragons character concept, where we take a look at the races from Dungeons & Dragons and do the same thing, making basic characters just by looking at the lore of those races. Today we are taking a look at the android, which actually hails from Paizo's sister RPG system, Starfinder, as you can see here. They are identical to the androids from Starfinder, which I guess this means it's a sort of a crossover. Should I do the Starfinder series in this video? You know what, probably not a good idea. I'll probably do that on a later date. If you would like to see a similar series for Starfinder at some point in the future, let me know. Anyway, the android are a race of semi-robotic people. They are both synthetic and organic, crash landing from Starfinder setting into the Pathfinder setting, quite literally. That is how their lore starts. A bunch of, I'm not making this up, wombs is what the technical term they gave these birthing chambers. Again, another term they used. A giant pod crash lands in a certain area within the Pathfinder world and starts spitting out these fully grown androids with no memory and also next to no personality, as androids tend to be logical, introvert, rational, and contemplative. But they are insatiably curious with an urge to understand themselves and the world around them. Androids place great value on intellectual pursuits. They have difficulty interpreting and expressing emotions, both in themselves and in others, which makes them seem distant and uncaring. So, they seem to have no personality, which is not actually the case. They do have a personality, though they are logical introverts. Reminds me of a few people, actually. Myself included. Anywho, while androids can forge emotional bonds, they find it more difficult to connect with non-androids. Which, I mean, that is rational, logical, because I don't know about you, but I find it hard to communicate myself. Though that's for a different reason. Anyway, moving on, let's take a look at what is recommended for the android. For your heritages, we have the Artisan Android, Impersonator Android, Laborer Android, Polyglot Android, and the Warrior Android. The backgrounds that are recommended are the Hermit, Nomad, Scholar, and Tinker. But going over the lore of the android, I personally would also recommend the Archaeologist, Astrologer, Clockwork Researcher, Disciple of the Gear, Gunsmith, Junk Collector, Junker, Laborer. Ooh, that would work well with the Laborer android. Mechanical Symbiosis, Saved by Clockwork, Scholar of the Ancients, Servant, and Tech Reliant. Androids are made up of organic and synthetic bodies, kind of a mixture of both. They're kind of a biomechanical being. Biomechanical. Gives me an idea for a video. Anywho, they do have a special fluid inside their bodies. Not quite blood. This is technically nanites living inside there, what would probably be considered a bloodstream, even though they have no blood. These nanites are what help them heal, and what help them get through their day-to-day lives. Sort of a metabolism. But also, like I said, it will heal, they will do things that will help the android survive. That's the basis of it. They are biomechanical beings with nanites flowing through their systems. And as they get older, they'll start to get these tattoo-like markings on their body. The lines of neon blue, or I guess neon green in some cases. But this is to show the nanites doing their job. For classes, it recommends the Alchemist, the Monk, the Rogue, and the Wizard. But what else can we do? Surely there is more to it than that, and that is what we're going to find out today. So let's go ahead and dive right on in. And if you have ever made an android character, or plan on making an android character, tell me in the comment section below what type of character you have or plan on making using this Ancestry. Starting things off with the first in the list of recommended classes is the Alchemist. For research fields, I thought that the Bomber and the Chirurgeon would be the better of the two research fields that could work with the android. While the others possibly could also work, I don't see that working well with the android, especially the mutagenist. That just seems counterproductive. Since they are already a biomechanical being, why in the world would they want to mutate their body? Or, for that matter, why would they want to mutate other people's bodies? Moving on to Bard. We're going with the Muses of the Enigma and the Polymath. Going with that logical demeanor, and also with the fact that they are trying to find who they themselves are. Next is the Champion. There's only one champion cause that I found to be practical for an android, and that is the Redeemer cause. No real reason behind it, it was just the only cause that seemed to fit. Next is the Cleric. We actually have 5 different deities to go over, but I only wanted to go over the main 2. For your doctrine, obviously the Cloistered Scholar, so you can get the benefits from your deities. And the 2 that are the most recommended are Cassana Del, the Iron Goddess, and Bry, the Whisper in Bronze. If you want to pause the video or go back and see which goddess is which, please do so. That way you know exactly what is going on here. But these are the 2 main goddesses for the android. The other 3 that are recommended, but I am not showing in this presentation, are Desna, Irori, and Gozre. Moving on to the Gunslinger class. Since androids seem to be nomadic in nature, I thought that the Way of the Drifter was the most appropriate gunslinger archetype. Trigger Brand just also seemed appropriate, but for a slightly different reason. What reason, I do not remember, but it seemed slightly appropriate for the android to take up these two different ways. Moving on to the inventor. It doesn't matter which invention you pick, all three of them fit the android perfectly, especially if you are picking up the tinker background. It just makes sense for them to not only either improve upon themselves using the armor invention, but also using the weapon invention if they are more on the protective side, or going with the construct invention for additional companionship, again to help protect their tribe. Next is the investigator. For methodologies, the empiricism was the best fit, since they take the logical route and use data in order to find out what is going on in certain situations. Alchemical sciences also seem to fit, though not as much as the empiricism. Next up is Rogue, and the only racket that made sense for the android was the mastermind, once again using that logical introvert thinking to help either control the situation or to make things a little bit easier for everyone else. Next is the Swashbuckler. I don't think there will be too many androids with this class, but if you do have an android with the Swashbuckler class, I do recommend the Braggart, the Fencer, and the Gymnast. Being biomechanical means that there's probably something in their nanites telling them that they need to move rather quickly. So having these different options available to an android somewhat makes sense. And finally, we are going for the Wizard class. Any one of the wizard schools would make sense for a wizard, though I would say that the Universalist is going to make the most sense if you ever do have an android wizard at all. And with that being said, that is the end of today's video. I do hope that you enjoyed. And with that being said, this has been Drehan, and I am offline.